Welcome back, everybody. This is the next in our series of the basics of CMMC, and probably the part that you've all been waiting for. We've given you really the full background on 32 CFR and 48 CFR and how they're going to tie to you being able to bid on contracts and your responsibilities if you choose to bid on contracts. Now we're going to talk about how you get yourself started. So the part I hope you've all been waiting for. This is Mark Hateman, president of Curie Solutions, and I've got our founder, Amira Armond, here with me to talk to you about what to do next to get started with CMMC.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so you think you might be required to do CMMC based on watching the previous videos. Hopefully, you do not already have a contract clause assigned to something you're bidding on, because that's not much time. Right. So hopefully you're ahead of the game, you're paying attention, and you've got a year or two to get ready. And this is what you should do to get ready. The next video, the last section that we're going to do is going to go through options. So if you do need to get it done in the next month, is there an option for that? Right? If you need a high-tech environment, what are the options for that? But for this video, we're going to give you an introduction to the different sources of information and the general steps that you want to go through to start preparing to get certified or do that self-assessment properly and bid on contracts. All right, so first off, this website, dodcio.defense.gov, has a section on CMMC, and everything in here is good to read.
This should be a favorited website, probably on your bookmarks bar, so you can get to it quickly.
So if you're brand new to CMMC, probably start with About. And then I'd come over here to the resources area and I'd go through the 101 brief. And then the model, you can listen to the overview briefing, but it's basically the same thing. And then read through the overview, right? And these are meant to be an introduction to CMMC. All right, next, you got to decide what data you need to protect. So pretty much every defense contractor is going to need to protect their federal contract information, which is basically any information about a contract which is not meant to be public information, and it is not subject to a carve-out for transactional accounting information. Okay, so just emails back and forth between you and your prime contractor or between you and the government count as federal contract information. Almost any report that you'll be putting together counts. Okay, now federal contract information needs to be protected at CMMC Level 1, which the instructions are in the Level 1 scoping guidance and the Level 1 self-assessment guide. Now, if you have controlled unclassified information from any DoD contract, then you need to be looking at the Level 2 guides. Okay, so Level 2 scoping guidance, Level 2 assessment guide, and I'll jump into that in a second. And then for Level 3, this is for highly sensitive controlled unclassified information. Generally, we haven't had real definitions of it from the DoD. They will say, this is the cutting edge new research and development stuff. One indication that you might need level 3, other than it showing up on your contract, is if a DIBCAC assessment has been done of your company already. Right. So if the DoD said, hey, we're going to come assess your cybersecurity, and they're forcing you to get assessed, that's a sign that you may need level 3 because the DoD is paying attention to you. But almost every company that's dealing with CUI will only need to do level 2. And that's about somewhere between 30,000 and 80,000 companies. So that's a lot.
It is a lot.
And in particular, level 2 has the potential for a certification assessment done by a third party, right? So the companies that are subject to level 2, there's a good chance that you're going to have somebody else double checking you. So you need to get it right, which is why I spend the most time on level 2. With level, yeah.
This might be a good place to interject about the DoD's guidance or belief. We don't have to go down it as a deep rabbit hole, but they have a belief that there's many fewer contractors that need to have this level of assessment done, and maybe you just want to touch on why that's the case, just in case you're reading other documentation elsewhere, you may see something that makes you say, well, no, that's like 1,800 companies. Where does 30,000 come from?
It's super hard to know how many companies are going to need this, because the DoD does not have visibility into subcontractors. There's very little visibility into it. There's very little tracking because the DoD has purposefully, and this goes for all federal government, they purposefully track the primes, and then they expect the primes to do the rest. They don't really want to get into your management of subcontractors.
Which makes sense.
Now, how many companies is it? There has been some reporting already required by subs with the DFARS 7019 and 7020 clauses, where it says that before you can be awarded a contract with these clauses, you need to have a self-assessment put into the supplier performance risk system. And if I remember correctly, after being in effect for, I think, about 4 years now, there's only 20,000 unique companies in that system. Okay, maybe less. So that pushes us towards there's a lot less companies than 30,000 or 80,000 if we've been requiring attestations for 4 years for any company that works on a DoD contract, and we've only got 10 to 20,000, right? The considerations are that it's not totally clear. That 7019 and 7020 clause is not being actively pushed to subcontractors in a lot of cases.
Okay.
So they could put it in, if they're paying attention, they could put in their score. And a prime could reach out to them and say, hey, did you do it? But there's not really any verification of that. A contract officer is generally only looking at the prime's entry, and that's it before they award the contract. So there could be many subs that just haven't been told they have to do this by their prime. Where we expect with CMMC, the prime's going to be way more on it because there's a higher
Accountability.
inspection, accountability, right? Affirmations, all that stuff. The other possibility, if we want to argue for this is actually a smaller group of companies, is we could have a situation where instead of having a triangle of primes up here to subs, what we could actually have is a reverse triangle where one sub helps multiple primes. Right? And how many companies do we know that are like that? There's actually a lot. Right? So if instead of being a triangle for every prime, they've got 100 subs, if it instead is more like a mishmash, a spaghetti diagram where, a prime has just as many subs as a sub has primes, it could be that number of subs is way less than expected. Right? But nobody knows. The CMMC effort might be where we actually figure out who's doing what for our supply chains. The third thing is, my little company, well, it's not little, as much anymore, but when I first started Carry Solutions, I was acting as a sub here and there for primes, right? I was actually working on little contracts here and there. And I can think of contracts where the prime never flowed down anything to me. They never checked my cybersecurity, right? They just said, hey, come in, meet me at the base, do some work.
Yeah. I
Right?
have had the same experience, yes.
Yeah. And I was honestly too new to know, too new to be in a small business to even know that was a big issue. Right. And I definitely didn't know about the DFAR 7012 and CUI at that time. It was 10 years ago. So that is another consideration, is that we could have many little companies that just they're not even being told, right? And the only person that would tell them is their prime contractor. So now that you know where to come for information, the next thing is to brainstorm what data do I have? Do I have any controlled unclassified information? Or is it only federal contract information? Remember that CUI is a subcategory of FCI. Right? So federal contract is anything related to a contract. CUI is related to contracts, right? But not necessarily the other way around. So if something is, if we're trying to see if it's CUI, any communication about the contract is not CUI, right? It's not all going to be that sensitive. So we need to figure out, do you have CUI? Ways to tell that you have CUI are a document says CUI on the top and the bottom, right? That's a good way of telling. It could also say controlled in all caps, top and bottom. A lot of times properly marked CUI will have a block on the front page that gives information about the information. It will say, category, and then it might say export controlled, or, naval nuclear propulsion information, or PHI, or whatever. It will say controlled by, and then give organization names, a POC, and it might have dissemination controls, like, only share it with US contractors, or only share it with government and contractors. So that block in the front is a really good way of telling if what you have is CUI. The next way you can tell if you have CUI is by seeing dissemination controls on the document. So if you see text somewhere that says, distribution is limited to United States government and contractors only or distribution is limited to U.S. persons only, blah, 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 applicable laws and regulations, right? That's a sign that it is CUI, and it's just not marked CUI yet. But there's a category of CUI called controlled technical information. And the definition for that category is it has a distribution control. Right? That's one of the definitions. So even if it's not marked CUI, if you've got something that says, only share it with limited people, that's a sign that it probably is CUI of type controlled technical information.
Which needs to be handled the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs to be protected with all the 110 requirements of CMMC Level 2, NIST SP 800-171.
Yep.
So once you realize, golly, I do have CUI, then it's a question of what information systems do you have where the CUI exists, right? And this is a very broad check. Is this in my corporate information system? If we've got more than one network, is it in one of our smaller networks? Is it in a test lab that's isolated from everything? Is it on home computers? Am I sharing it with people who are using their personal computer to do work? That's not a good thing, by the way. That's really bad. So you need to figure out where that CUI is within your organization's systems. And if possible, you're going to want to consolidate it to reduce your scope, right? Reduce the things that you need to do security for. But start with just knowing where it is. You can make a big list. This project is on this file share and these people's computers. This project is on that file share and this database and these people's computers, right? Start there. And then you're going to use the Level 2 scoping guide. And you'll use these asset categories to determine what type of asset you have. Right. So if you have an asset that actually processes, stores, or transmits CUI, like your file server, your database, that would be considered a controlled unclassified information asset. And then you can read over here to see what you need to do to secure it. And there's more categories. Once you have scoped this out, and by the way, this assumes that you've got a pretty smart cybersecurity person doing this work for you. Generally, CMMC professionals will actually go take a course. They'll go take the certified CMMC professional course and or the certified CMMC assessor course, which is the next level up, to really learn how to do this scoping. This is a topic that takes multiple days to teach in a training course.
Shameless plug again. We've got a series that we did around scoping, and I believe that if you watch that, while it will provide you with a lot of the basics and a better understanding of each of these, it will also demonstrate to you what level of effort and understanding this takes to really be able to say, I've figured out my asset categories and they're in alignment with what's going to be required to get my assessment.
Scoping is super complex, and it's not straightforward. It's not intuitive. And even reading these guides, you're still going to be like, what is going on? If you're the person who's supposed to be preparing your company for this, I highly recommend going to take a week-long training course. We recommend Edwards Performance Solutions as the training provider. That's one of the reasons why I'm one of the instructors for Edwards, is I think they've got good material. But it is a little bit expensive, right? It's about $3,000 to take a course with them. But you will reap the rewards by having less churn, less mistakes, right? All right, so now we know what we need to secure, and hopefully you know stuff that you don't need to secure after doing this scoping exercise. And then you're going to come to the assessment guide for level 2. And you're going to go through these requirements. There's 110, one by one, and figure out how to do what it says for your in-scope environment. So we can take this one, for example. There's a requirement statement. These are always one sentence, but they're broken into assessment objectives, which is there's either one or there's multiple for each requirement. For you to do this requirement, for you to be marking this as met, you need to be doing each of the assessment objectives. And this is not like a mostly. This is you need to do all of them for your environment. And it's going to take you time to figure out what these are asking for, because they're written in very generic language, which is intended to be solution agnostic. And it can be so generic that even a cybersecurity professional is just like, I don't even know what this is talking about, right? So for example, it took me probably a year working mostly full-time to really understand all of the assessment objectives in level 2. Right? And I get a little bit better through the years. It takes, during class with Edwards, it takes 2 days to get through each of these requirements and discuss them enough to briefly introduce them to the students, to try and make sure we don't have a misunderstanding. 2 full days, right? 16 hours. Okay, so you're going to go through these one by one and implement them, and that could include writing policies, writing procedures, having a form that you tell your people to use. It could include training your staff. It could be manual procedures that you actually do. That's a really big one, by the way. Like change management, for example, which is how you would do this one, right? Is having a good change management process to make sure when you do set up mobile devices and mobile computing platforms, aka laptops, that you've got encryption on them. And then a lot of record keeping, right? So you're going to be writing what's called a system security plan. And if you want to see examples of system security plans, we've got multiple videos on the topic. If you want to see a really nice system security plan template that you can buy, which is mostly pre-written, search for the CARI compliance documentation, or go to the CARI.com website. And we've got, I think it's about an hour worth of videos that actually show you like the documentation you would use for level 2. Right? And this is past assessment for multiple companies. If you want to do it yourself, then search for our video on system security plan, which is one that I recorded years ago, and it's zero promotion for anything. So you don't have to worry about, wanting to buy something afterwards. And it's going to talk about how you can do it yourself and how you can document these requirements yourself. Okay. Now that you have documented and you've made technical changes to your environment, now you have to do a self-assessment, which is actually one of the requirements here. So just doing these requirements for level 2 includes doing a full self-assessment that you've actually done it. Which is why it's funny when people complain that they have to do self-assessments, but they say they've been doing all the requirements for CMMC all along, right? Well, pick one, right? You're either not doing it and you're not doing self-assessments, and this is a new burden, or you are doing it and you are doing self-assessments, in which case it's not a new burden. So a self-assessment is basically putting on your assessor hat and pretending that you are a full certified assessor, which hopefully you are, right? That's actually, if you're in that role and your company is a decent sized company, you really should go through the training to do this correctly. You can also hire an assessor to help you with this. Okay. I feel strongly that the certified professionals and the certified assessors for CMMC are the minimum qualification you should look for helping you get ready, doing a self-assessment, doing a gap, or doing a real certification assessment. Okay, these are people that have gone through potentially weeks of training on this topic, and they really know what they're doing. The other titles in CMMC, registered practitioners, they are not taught at that level. They just simply are not. Okay, so they are not taught how to do all the complexities of scoping. They are not taught how to do all the complexities of understanding these assessment objectives. So if you want to make sure you're good, work with a certified title. Okay. All right, so you're going to do a self-assessment. You're going to come up with a score based on your knowledge, and you're going to put it into a reporting mechanism. So right now, the only reporting mechanism we have is the supplier performance risk system. But I believe that we're, for CMMC, going to have something called eMASS, where people are going to be able to put in their results. It might be that regular companies will still put their stuff into the supplier performance risk system, and only C3POs will work in eMASS. I'm not totally sure. Do you know, Mark?
It would seem, at least as of now, that it's the latter. C3PAOs are being given a number of individuals within their organization that will have eMASS access to enter the information from an assessment that they perform. So maybe it's going to be both. I don't know. There is not clear. Currently, I'm not aware of clarity around if you're doing a self-assessment, like a level 1 assessment, where you're putting that, if that's going to stay, outside of eMASS. It's just not clear at this point. But I do know that as third-party assessors, we have individuals that have been trained on eMASS and will be entering your assessment score in eMASS on behalf of the company seeking certification.
All right, and then finally, so this is assuming that you're doing a self-assessment, which you're going to need to be doing no matter what. You may also need a C3PO assessment, certification assessment. So you can go to the cyberab.org, click on Marketplace, and then sort on pre-authorized C3POs, or maybe we'll see authorized C3POs as the listing.
Yeah, it will change.
And you can search for one that's near you, or just pick them out of the list. There's unfortunately not a whole lot of information about each one that's been lost recently. But here's Carrie, just in case you're curious. Okay. So you can reach out, you can email them and ask if they've got availability to do an assessment and get quotes, for example, right? And they should be able to handhold you through the process. And then once you're certified, life is good, right? Enjoy limited competition. It's going to be a big market boost to be CMMC Level 2 certified. And even for the folks that are doing self-certifications, I think there's still going to be companies that aren't willing to do it if they're not actually fully secure.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's finish it there, and we'll have another segment soon.
Thank you very much, Amira.
Thank you, Mark.